I married my safe choice. Now I regret it. I was already inside the moment when I realized something wasn't right. Not danger, not panic, just a quiet awareness that I was standing on the wrong side of something and didn't know how I'd crossed over. I was in the hallway outside my apartment, keys in my hand, coat still on, listening to the building settle around me. The overhead light flickered once, steadied, then flickered again. I noticed it because I'd been staring at it too long. The carpet smelled like lemon cleaner layered over old dampness, the kind that never really goes away. Somewhere below me, water rushed through the pipes, loud enough to feel like movement inside the walls. I unlocked the door, relocked it, then unlocked it again without knowing why. When I stepped inside, I didn't turn the lights on. The apartment was dim except for the blue glow of the kitchen clock. The air felt warmer than it should have, heavy, like it had been held. I closed the door quietly behind me, the way you do when someone might be sleeping, even though I lived alone. On the counter, placed neatly between my work badge and my wallet, was a folded piece of white paper. It hadn't been there when I left that morning. I knew that because I'd been late and knocked the mail over with my elbow. This was centered, intentional. I didn't touch it right away. I stood there listening to the refrigerator hum, to my own breathing, to the faint sounds of other people living their lives through thin walls. When I finally unfolded the paper, the handwriting was immediately familiar. Careful, controlled, calm. You already know. I didn't marry her because of passion. That sentence always lands wrong when I say it, like I'm confessing to something cruel, but it's the truth. I married her because nothing went wrong. We met through mutual friends at a birthday gathering in a loud bar where the music swallowed conversation. She laughed easily. She asked thoughtful questions. She talked about timing, signs, things being meant. I talked about work, about plans, about how I liked things to make sense. She told me later she liked that I felt steady. We dated for a year before moving in together. There wasn't a dramatic conversation about it. Her lease ended. My apartment was larger. It made sense. We made lists, furniture, groceries, expenses. She wanted plants. I wanted fewer objects. We compromised by buying plants I promised I'd water. She said we were good at compromise. I agreed, because technically, we were. She talked about soulmates early on, not dramatically, casually, like it was already established. On long drives, she'd say things like, "I think some people recognize each other," while staring out the window. I nodded. I told myself language mattered less than action. When she asked me directly if I believed we were soulmates, I said I believed we chose each other. She smiled like that answered the question completely. Marriage came the same way everything else did, gradually, logically. We were already sharing finances. Our families liked each other. We didn't fight loudly. She brought it up one night while we were half watching something on my laptop, bills spread across the table. "Do you ever think about making this official?" she asked. I said, "It makes sense." She cried when we signed the papers at the courthouse. I held her purse. The clerk stapled the forms with practiced efficiency. The sound was sharp, final. We took a photo outside. The sun made her squint. She posted it later with a caption about forever. She told people we were soulmates. I told people we were solid. The first year of marriage was quiet. We learned routines. I learned to sleep through her alarm. She learned I needed the kitchen clean before bed. She talked about the future constantly, not anxiously, but confidently, like it was already written. Names for children. A house with a porch. A dog that would sleep at our feet. When I tried to imagine it myself, the image felt flat, like a brochure for a place I'd never visited. I didn't tell her that. I told myself everyone has doubts. The first crack didn't come as a fight. It came as absence. I started staying later at work, not because I needed to, but because there was no urgency to leave. I'd sit in my car in the parking garage after turning the engine off, listening to footsteps echo from other levels. When I walked into the apartment, she'd look relieved in a way that made me feel like I'd failed something invisible. She asked for reassurance often. Quietly, "You're happy, right?" she'd say while folding laundry or washing dishes. I said yes because I wasn't unhappy. I just wasn't certain. There's a difference, but I didn't know how to explain it then. The word settled came to me in a grocery store aisle. We were arguing about pasta sauce. Not fighting, disagreeing gently. She wanted a brand because her mother always bought it. I wanted the cheaper one. She placed her choice in the cart with a small nod. Under the fluorescent lights, with another cart bumping into mine behind us, I felt a weight in my chest. Not panic, not dread, just heaviness. And the thought arrived fully formed. This is enough for her. I don't know if it's enough for me. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't even admit it to myself fully. I tried to fix the feeling the way I fix everything, by doing better. Flowers, weekend trips, photos, proof. She posted them with captions about destiny. People commented with hearts. I stood where I was supposed to stand. The night she asked if I was happy, the apartment felt too quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off outside and stopped abruptly. She sat at the table with her hands flat on the surface, like she needed grounding. When she asked the question, I looked at the microwave clock. It was still fast by 2 minutes. I'd meant to fix it. "I'm okay," I said. "That's not what I asked," she said. When she asked if I believed we were soulmates, I hesitated too long. I felt it before I heard it. I said something careful, something accurate but insufficient. She cried quietly at first, then harder, like something had finally broken loose. When she asked if I'd settled for her, the words sounded sharper out loud than it ever had in my head. I said I didn't know. That was when everything tipped. She moved out slowly, not angrily, methodically. We talked logistics instead of feelings. She posted things online about healing and divine timing. I muted her accounts. The divorce paperwork sat on my desk for weeks before I filed it. It felt like it should hurt more than it did, and that bothered me more than the absence of pain itself. The apartment felt different after she left. Quieter, but not peaceful. Like a room after a party when the cups are still on the table. I told myself this was temporary. That adjustment always feels strange. That certainty would come later. That was before the messages started. The first message didn't feel important enough to remember. That's what bothers me now. How easy it was to dismiss it. It came through as a message request from an account with no photo and a string of numbers for a name. No introduction. Just a sentence. You already know. I stared at it for a few seconds, waiting for something else to appear, like context might load if I gave it time. Nothing did. I deleted it. I didn't block the account. It felt unnecessary. People send strange messages all the time. Spam, bots, accidental taps. I put my phone face down on the table and went back to rinsing a coffee mug that didn't need rinsing. 2 days later, another message came. Different account. Same sentence. Same punctuation. I blocked that one. I told myself it was coincidence, the kind that only feels meaningful because you notice it twice. The third message arrived late at night, when I was already tired enough that my thoughts felt loose. This one added a second line. This is what recognition feels like. I didn't respond. I didn't block it right away either. I set my phone down on the counter and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the apartment settle. The refrigerator clicked. The building made a low groan somewhere behind the walls. I slept poorly that night, waking up several times without knowing why. The notes started after that. The first one was under my windshield wiper. I noticed it because the paper was clean and white against the dusty glass. Folded once. Neat. I stood there in the parking lot holding my keys, reading it while a car idled behind me waiting for the spot. It was a quote about timing, something vague enough to be harmless, specific enough to feel deliberate. I crumpled it and threw it away in the trash near the stairwell. I didn't take a picture. I didn't think I'd need to. The second note was taped to my apartment door, low enough that you'd miss it if you weren't looking straight ahead. Same handwriting, same careful folding. This time I took a photo before throwing it away. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe, or the quiet realization that this was becoming a pattern. I bought a cheap accordion folder from an office supply store on my way home from work. Blue plastic, thin. I labeled the tabs with a pen I found in my car. Notes, screenshots, dates. The labeling felt excessive and calming at the same time, like I was turning something shapeless into something I could hold. The notes appeared every few days after that, under my windshield wiper again, tucked into my mailbox between bills. Once, slipped under my door so far that only the edge was visible when I opened it. Always neat, always calm, never threatening. Quotes about connection, about souls finding each other regardless of form. I started photographing each one before putting it in the folder. I wrote the date and time on the back in small, careful handwriting that didn't look like mine. I changed my privacy settings on every platform I could think of. I blocked message requests. I removed my email from public profiles. For a week, nothing happened. I slept better. I told myself I'd overreacted. Then the messages came back. Email this time. A burner address with no name. Same tone. Same certainty. You feel it too. You don't stop knowing just because you stop speaking. I stopped deleting them and started saving screenshots instead. I backed them up to a cloud folder with a name that meant nothing to anyone else. I started emailing myself weekly summaries. Dates, times, what I was doing when the message arrived. It felt ridiculous and methodical. Both things can be true. I called her. I hadn't planned to. The decision came suddenly, like my body moved before my thoughts caught up. She answered on the second ring. When I asked if she was sending me messages, she sounded genuinely confused, then hurt. She said she would never scare me. Said she still believed we were connected, but she was respecting my space. I listened for signs, defensiveness, anger, satisfaction. I heard none. When we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand and wrote down the date and time of the call anyway. The building manager showed me hallway footage after I reported the notes. Grainy, black and white, the angle just wrong. A hooded figure approached my door, paused, bent down, placed something, then walked away. The timestamp showed a time when I'd been at work. The manager apologized. Said without a clear face, there wasn't much they could do. Suggested I be vigilant. Suggested extra locks. I installed extra locks. I started checking the hallway before opening my door. Not dramatically, just a glance left, right. The carpet near my unit had a loose thread I memorized without meaning to. The overhead light buzzed faintly now. I didn't remember it doing that before, but maybe it always had. I stopped using the elevator at night. I took the stairs, counting them without trying to. The police station smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. I sat in a plastic chair watching a digital number display tick upward. When it was my turn, I laid out the folder on the desk. The officer flipped through it slowly, asked careful questions. Did I know who it might be? Had I confronted anyone directly? Was there a history of conflict? I told him about my ex-wife, about the separation, about the divorce still pending. I told him I didn't think it was her. He nodded like he'd heard that before. He gave me a report number printed at the bottom of a form. Told me to call if anything escalated. The word escalated sat there, undefined. The escalation didn't announce itself. It layered. The notes became more specific. References to conversations we'd had years ago. Small details no stranger should know. The messages arrived closer together, sometimes minutes apart. Always when I was alone enough to notice. Never during meetings. Never when I was distracted. I stopped sleeping through the night. I woke up to check the locks. I kept my phone face up on the nightstand, brightness turned down. I started flinching at notification sounds that weren't there. One message referenced the grocery store aisle. Not the argument about pasta sauce, but the moment itself. The exact placement of the cart. The fluorescent lighting. Details I'd never shared with anyone. I read it 3 times before screenshotting it. My hands shook enough that the first photo came out blurred. I started keeping a log in a notebook I bought specifically for this purpose. Black, spiral bound, the kind students use. I documented everything chronologically. Time of message, content summary, my location when it arrived, what I'd been doing. The act of writing made my breathing steady. It turned fear into data. The divorce finalized on a Thursday afternoon. It rained hard enough to blur the street outside my office window. I got the confirmation email at 2:17 p.m. I stared at it longer than necessary. That night, a note waited for me in the stairwell I used to avoid the elevator. Even endings are choices we make together. That was the first time I felt something like anger. Not heat, not rage, just a tightening. I took the note straight to the police the next morning. Different officer this time. Younger. He reviewed the folder, asked if I had proof it wasn't my ex-wife. I said not yet. He told me to keep documenting. He suggested a temporary restraining order if I felt threatened. Threatened felt like the wrong word. I told him I felt observed. He nodded like he understood the difference. I started varying my routines. Different routes to work. Different grocery stores. Different times for everything. I told myself I was being proactive. The truth was I was trying to become unpredictable to someone who seemed to know my patterns better than I did. A message arrived while I was standing in a new coffee shop I'd never been to before. It referenced the blue walls. The chipped corner of the counter near the register. The song playing overhead. I left without ordering. The email from building security came by accident. Forwarded to me instead of management. It included a still image attachment from a different camera angle. Clearer. Side view. No hood. I recognized the code immediately. I bought it for her 3 winters ago. I remembered the zipper sticking in the store and the way she laughed about it. The confirmation didn't feel dramatic. It felt heavy. Like gravity finally behaving the way it was supposed to. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with the image open on my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I closed the computer, opened the folder, and added a new tab. Evidence. I didn't confront her right away. That surprised me about myself, how long I waited, even after the evidence stopped being abstract. I think part of me still wanted the situation to resolve itself quietly, the way everything else in my life had. I printed the still image from the security footage and slid it into the folder under the new tab. I didn't label the page with her name. I labeled it with the date and time the image had been captured. That felt safer, more accurate. The next few days passed in a strange calm. The messages stopped. The notes stopped. I didn't feel relief so much as suspension, like something had paused mid-motion. I kept expecting my phone to vibrate. I kept checking the stairwell out of habit. My body stayed alert even when there was nothing to respond to. I filed for the restraining order on my lunch break. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. Fluorescent lights. Scuffed floors. A clerk slid the paperwork toward me without looking up. I filled in dates and addresses carefully, copying them from the notes in my folder so I wouldn't make a mistake. When she asked if I wanted temporary or permanent protection, I hesitated too long. I chose temporary. It felt less accusatory, even though that wasn't the point. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. I didn't tell anyone at work. I didn't tell my family. I told one friend, briefly, without details. Saying it out loud made it sound smaller than it felt. When I left the courthouse, the air outside felt sharp and clean. I stood on the steps for a moment, letting the feeling pass through me, then went back to work like it was any other day. The night before the hearing, I slept in short stretches. I woke up to check the locks. I woke up to silence. At some point near morning, I dreamed I was back in the grocery store aisle, staring at shelves that kept rearranging themselves. When I woke up for good, my jaw hurt from clenching. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. No audience. Just the judge, a clerk, and the 2 of us sitting on opposite sides of a narrow table. She looked composed, calm. She wore the coat from the image, the one I'd bought. I noticed the zipper immediately. It still caught slightly when she adjusted it. When she spoke, her voice was steady. She talked about intuition, about connection beyond logic, about how some people deny what they feel because it scares them. She said she hadn't meant to frighten me. She said the notes were meant as reminders, not threats. She said the messages were expressions, not harassment. When it was my turn, I didn't argue belief with belief. I didn't talk about love or soulmates or intention. I talked about dates, times, locations. I referenced the report number. I described the footage. I described the pattern. I kept my hands folded on the table because they shook when I didn't. The judge listened without interrupting. When he asked her why she continued after I asked her to stop, she hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Enough. The order was granted. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No closing statements. The clerk printed the paperwork. The sound of the printer felt loud in the small room. She was instructed not to contact me, not to approach my home or workplace. The words were plain, direct, effective. Afterward, I walked to my car and sat there for several minutes without starting the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel. I noticed the texture of the leather. I noticed the quiet. The feeling wasn't relief. It was something closer to gravity returning, like my body finally knew which way was down. I moved apartments within the month. Not because the order required it, but because I needed to change the geography of my days. I chose a place with brighter hallways, newer locks, a different routine. The building had wide windows that let morning light reach places my old apartment never did. I changed my phone number. I updated my email. I told building management nothing beyond what was necessary. The folder went into a drawer in my desk. I didn't throw it away. I didn't feel the need to look at it anymore either. Some things don't need to be revisited to remain real. The messages never came back. Sometimes I think about the word settled, about how small it sounded in my head when I first thought it, how sharp it became once it left my mouth. I think about how careful I was with logistics and how careless I was with meaning. I think about how easily certainty can turn into entitlement when it isn't checked. I don't think I settled for her. I think I failed to understand how dangerous it can be when someone decides your life belongs to them more than it belongs to you. Now my routines are quieter. Morning light through new blinds. Keys placed in the same bowl every night. Paperwork filed. Doors locked once, not twice. When I turn the key, I wait for the click to finish. I let it end there. The overhead light in my new hallway doesn't flicker. I still look up every time I pass under it, just to check. Some habits take longer to unlearn than others. But the checking feels different now. Not fearful, just aware. I learned that safety isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of boundaries that hold. It's documentation that speaks when your voice shakes. It's choosing to act even when action feels excessive. It's understanding that love, real love, asks for consent in every form, not just once, but continuously. The folder stays in the drawer. The locks work properly. The phone number is mine alone. And when I close the door at night, I no longer listen for sounds that shouldn't be there. I listen to the ordinary settling of a building where nothing is wrong, where the quiet is just quiet, where I can finally rest.